Well, welcome to the SILIP Hustings event. This is the third time that we've done these. We missed out last year, but we did one the year before that. And the year before that, there was one in Midlands. So it's really nice that we've got one here in London. My name's Phil Bradley, and I am SILIP President, and I will be chairing this evening's event. And I'll start by giving you a little bit of the fairly, unfortunately, boring but straightforward, necessary stuff that we've got to do on the administration that we've got for the evening. And I'll start with the purpose of the event, why we're all here tonight. It's really to provide an opportunity for members, and indeed everybody that has an interest, to find out about the candidates who are standing for election. It gives members an opportunity to make an informed choice and to make their vote count. And hopefully it will encourage members to get involved with the professional body, and I certainly would encourage as many members as possible to vote. This is your professional organisation. These are 6 people who believe strongly in the organisation, and they deserve your respect and your support, and particularly your vote. So please, if you've got any ideas at all, any care and love for the organisation, which may sound a little bit naive or a little bit emotional, but it is an important organisation for a lot of us. If you've got anything for that, do please feel that you should vote, and do take note of what the candidates are going to be talking about this evening. You've got to return your ballot papers or vote online by 5 p.m. on Monday the 25th of November. The way that we'll work the timings is that each candidate will have 5 minutes to introduce themselves and to summarise their manifesto. I'll let you know when you have 1 minute left, and I will be very strict about cutting you off at the end of your 5 minutes if you are going to be carrying on, because we are on a tight time schedule this evening. After we've heard from each of the candidates, we'll take a short break. We will then come back to a question and answer session where the candidates will take questions. I will ask the questions that have been submitted prior to the event, either by email or that have been given to me personally. We'll then take another short break from about 7:25 to 7:35, and then we'll come back for the final session with a second question and answer element, which hopefully will be taking questions from Twitter. I've already seen 1 or 2 tweeted questions. Please do feel free during the course of this evening to tweet more questions, and I can then throw them to our, I was going to say victims, but our candidates who are here this evening. So that's basically the way in which it's going to be working. We've got the 6 candidates standing for election to fill 4 posts as councillors of SILIP. The successful candidates will serve on council from the 1st of January 2014 to the 31st of December 2016. Council is responsible and liable for the management of SILIP, and it's accountable to a variety of stakeholders, including members and the Charity Commission. Council sets and oversees overall strategic direction of SILIP, and councillors should actively engage with SILIP stakeholders and act as ambassadors for SILIP. The final thing, just on the voting, I've said that they've got to be, you've got to have your vote in, and that's got to be by 5 p.m. on Monday the 25th of November. Personal members of SILIP are eligible to vote. Affiliate, chartered, certificated and associate and chartered members, and chartered and honorary fellows. Results will be announced shortly after Tuesday the 26th, Wednesday the 27th of November. So do sit by your Twitter streams and wait the results with interest. Right, so what I would now like to do in alphabetical order by surname is ask each of the candidates to spend their 5 minutes wisely by telling us who they are and what their particular manifesto happens to be. And we will be starting with Andy Dawson. So over to you, Andy.
All right, thank you very much. Well, I'll try not to take 5 minutes because the manifesto as published is short, and I think it summarises the key thing. I've been a councillor for the past 3 years, and I know there's been some flack, and a lot of it has been justified about, in my view, about aspects of openness and how we've handled certain things. But the key thing is we need change, and we've made change, very beneficial change. It hasn't always been appreciated in the way that perhaps it might. But I think we're moving in the right direction. I think we're absolutely moving in the right direction, and I think it's really important that we keep moving in the right direction. We have stemmed, to a large extent, the hemorrhaging of members. That's turning round. We've got the finances back on a decent track. The whole management of CILIP is now doing what it should be doing, focusing on providing services for members, knowing what's for the membership, fitting it to their needs, and we've got a long way to go. We've got to rebuild the membership, and if CILIP as an organisation, as a voice for the profession, wants to be strong, it's got to build its membership back up. And the critical thing here, in my view, as I've said repeatedly, is that we have to broaden. Libraries are critically important. I'm a huge supporter of libraries, but it's much, much more than that. And there are so many workers in so many aspects of information work who need to be part of this organisation if this organisation is going to be strong. And as far as I'm concerned, that's where we need to go. And I'm happy in just leaving it there.
All right, thank you very much, Andy. I would next like to invite John Dolan to give his 5-minute presentation.
Thank you, Phil. Maybe I could buy a minute from Andy. See you later.
A small thing.
It can come as a surprise to new trustees, it did to me a couple of years ago, and indeed voters, that the first priority is their legal obligation to ensure that CILIP, as Andy was describing, operates within charity law and the Charity Commission guidelines. This is not the glamorous bit, but without it we would fail. And the first duty for us to think about when we're voting is the legal responsibilities of trustees, sound direction, secure finances and proper management, and ultimately delivering public good. And CILIP does that first and foremost by giving its members, yourselves, a modern service. CILIP's members need relevance and currency, innovation and responsiveness. We all say we want to change CILIP and to meet the future head on. Why? Well, our professional work has changed radically, and the world with which we operate in has changed radically too. Government policy and needs of society, the economy, demands on education, and the need to learn throughout life. These are familiar concepts for those of us who listen at conferences and so on, but they're not always common in the workplace day to day where our members spend so much of their lives. There's a huge focus at present on public libraries, but all members need access to transformational learning opportunities and support, and that's CILIP's role. So why modernise? Numbers, as Andy is saying, have been going down for years. It's not a recent phenomenon, and the membership numbers have gone down. The most common reasons given by departing members, and those at council have seen the data on this, are retirement and financial constraints due to personal finances, part-time working, lower-paid jobs, and so on. Only 7% leave because they are dissatisfied with what CILIP is doing for them. So the fall has now halted, as Andy said, and CILIP is turning it round. At the same time, the potential membership expands. There are new library and information professionals in business, in the third sector, in government and public service, and across the 4 nations. People are delivering library information knowledge management services in very diverse settings. And that's where our membership restoration sits. That's where we should be following our change path into the future. So what? CILIP's modernisation must continue. Governance review is I think it's coming out about now, it's up for grabs there. Specifically, it includes a policy committee with special interest group members actively forming CILIP policy. It includes better recognition of and representation from all the 4 nations of the United Kingdom, which is essential as the government's policies diverge. The professional skills base is a redefinition of the skills we need in our work and absolutely relevant to CILIP's future. The branches and groups review, with the proposed regional member networks for accessible local learning and support. The new public and mobile libraries group, led by local staff and new professionals from its 3,000 membership. A new journal, e-newsletters, public-facing events and profile-raising awards are all planned. The new website is here now with professional registration, virtual learning environment, learning resources and support for personal development and career planning. All these things take us into a future that is relevant to the members and to new members who might come forward from the worlds that Andy and I have both described. Diversity is not a feature our profession enjoys. A study next year of the membership will give us a foundation both for current monitoring and further action to recruit to the profession and to CILIP. And as advocates, CILIP can give members increasing confidence, skill, messages and the voice to convey their valuable role and enormous potential. But it's more than campaigning. Strategy and leadership has to reflect a mix of focused priorities and a wide reach and relevance for all that membership that we anticipate together. CILIP works closely with campaigners, largely focused on public libraries.
1 minute.
And CILIP is part of the Speak Up for Libraries Coalition, helping organise the conference in November 23rd, and a follow-up meeting to see where we go from there, and organising, of course, National Libraries Day. I would want to continue to engage members more and to encourage more members to play an active part in CILIP. Not taking CILIP forward, not just reacting to issues and challenges. And that's why the governance review has a membership involvement built into it. Why this year we're working on information management, information literacy, real current issues that we saw exhibited in the OECD results about literacy in the UK. A stronger identity for the 4 nations as they diversify. CILIP is here to give members confidence, information and the messages they can use in their communities and their workplace. And this is more than a capacity to survive against cuts. It is to build strength, visibility and investment in the future. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, John. I would next like to invite Karen McFarlane at the other end of the table to use her 5 minutes. Thank you very much.
I'm really talking very much to my manifesto, so perhaps we talk about that. I just really want to get across to the membership about why I feel so passionate about standing as a counsellor and making a difference for us, for our profession. I feel very strongly about CPD and about us as professionals, about our skills and about what we need from our qualifications. I feel very strongly about having CILIP as our professional body, as having a real strong and confident voice for us in the UK on information matters. I believe that we have to find a way within CILIP of being able to articulate very, very clearly what the benefits of the skills that we have, what we can bring, what value we have as professionals, what difference we can make to the places that we work. But equally, we've got to be thinking about how we need to change and how our roles need to change. We've not only we've got to think outside our traditional roles, think about the new enriched roles that we need to be moving into. I also think that I'm following on from what John was saying about the IAM Summit and the work we're doing with CILIP with information management. It's really important that we as a professional body are advocating the value of information management to organisations and society as general, and the very fact that you need knowledgeable and skilled information practitioners in that area. I'm standing because I really want to make CILIP a true community of library, information and knowledge professionals, and I want to draw on the experience that I have in government of how I've brought the various disciplines, record managers, information managers, internet managers, librarians, all together to make one unified profession. And I think I can help CILIP in that agenda. I'm also, sort of just in summary now, just my time is going. So I'm here to promote the value of our skills. I want to support the new registration process. I want to encourage that take-up by that wider profession, those information managers, record managers, knowledge managers that I've mentioned. And we also need to be promoting the value of our registration process, of our qualifications to our employers. Employers need to understand the value, what they're getting when they're getting an accredited or registered CILIP professional. I want to promote the benefits of the membership. We've got to grow. We've got to reach that wider community that I've talked about. And we need to make connections with other professional bodies. I've experienced with working with ARA and IRMS. I can bring that to CILIP. And finally, we have to strengthen the governance and our financial position. We're a charity. We have to ensure that CILIP is well run and it's compliant with charity law.
Thank you very much. Next up is David McMenemy.
Thanks, sir. Like the others, I'll speak mainly to my manifesto. Two things I would like to highlight are essentially our role, our very important role with the public and making them aware of what we do. And I feel certainly in the past few years, the public have had very little support from us as a body. There's libraries closing, they feel isolated. I acknowledge what John says about the support we've been giving them, but I think we need to have a braver voice. I think they need to feel much more supported. Going back to the Royal Charter, it says for the benefit of the public. That's why we exist. Everything that John stated about what the council's done, I agree with. Making it a steady ship is important, absolutely. Our role as trustees, if elected, is important. But for me, fundamentally, a professional body is about the public. If we don't serve their interests and only serve our own, or primarily serve our own, then I don't think we have a right to exist, frankly. I think we need to have a stronger voice. I go to America quite occasionally, to the LA. They have a very confident professional voice. I would like to see us mirror that. I would like to see us talk about things like censorship, filtering, the important things that are impacting on people's day-to-day lives. It doesn't mean that all of the other stuff isn't important. Obviously it is, and you wouldn't want anyone looking after the body who doesn't understand strategy, finance, etc. But I think allied with that, we need passion and we need a real voice that people identify with. One of the reasons that I think people feel so frustrated with us is that they are fighting their own fight in their own communities, and I don't think that's good. We should be there to support them. 71 years ago, the LA, as it was, hired McColvin to reshape public libraries. That's the kind of bravery I think we need. Not just in public libraries, across all sectors, but we need to start thinking much more bravely, much more courageously, and actually meaning something to the public. And that's my main concern.
Thank you very much. We're now 2/3 of the way through, and so next I would like to invite Tom Roper and his 5 minutes.
Thank you. I'll spare you the bio. You can see it on the CILIP website in the manifesto, and people may care to know that on the Inanstis's publiclibrarynews.com website over the next few days there will be some details about all the candidates emerging, which may show the more human side of us, to the extent that any of us are human. In a sense, we're the wrong candidates, and this is the wrong election. Let me explain what I mean by that. It's inevitable in organisations of this sort, and I've been a librarian in a professional body, as well as being a long-term member of CILIP and of the LANIS before them. It's inevitable that the people you get who put themselves forward for council are the ones who nobody would notice if they weren't at their workplace. It's inevitable that we will be towards retirement. And I think one of the things we ought to be thinking about, if we're to reinvigorate CILIP, and I think that is the task, is why the excellent new professionals we have, who are incredibly active, aren't putting themselves forward for council. Council shouldn't be for the greybeards. It should be somewhere that any active professional should feel that they could put themselves forward. We haven't actually had an election, as Phil pointed out, since 2011. I'm not sure, and I await with interest the governance review. Council saw it back in March, and it's good to know that at last the members will be allowed to see it. In my view, it should have proposed something like Athenian democracy, where we don't have elections at all. We have lots, and it is the duty of every CILIP member to serve the organisation, and you are drawn by lot. The issue of membership is fundamental because we reached our lowest point in the history of the organisation this summer. The last figures that are available were those reported to the June meeting or July meeting of Council, 13.5 thousand members. That's the lowest we've been, so there's no evidence that it's getting any better yet. We need to tackle the failure to recruit and the failure to retain. We also need to tackle a gap that has emerged, I think, between members and Council. That was evident at the AGM, where Council proposed an unpopular name change that was voted down. And so when we think about a fundamental rethink of the direction CILIP takes, it has to start with a completely white sheet of paper. And I think what we've been doing now is plainly wrong, so when you're in the hole, you stop digging. I believe we should be more open with ourselves. I believe we should be more open with the outside world. I think there is a new relationship that we're developing with campaigners. We have been seen to be an obstacle in the way. We need to become something different. And the motion on Ed Vaizey, of no confidence in Ed Vaizey, was a step towards doing that. I was very pleased to see the CILIP statement on the government's DIY library webpage the other day. There's no doubt that we need a strong professional body to do the tasks of regulation, of education, of advocacy, and I think it's up to both a new council and for every CILIP member to take responsibility for us doing that.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, David Stewart.
The joy, everyone, of going last. I was invited to talk about leadership at the Umbrella Conference this year, and I was on last. And I just got up and said, I agree with everything that's been said, and went to sit down, which at least got a laugh, which is always fun when you're talking about leadership. Again, I'm on last. There's very little I can disagree with. All I can do, I've not been on council so far, is I can talk a bit about what things that I think I bring to CILIP and what I think I can bring to council. I've been in membership of this organisation since 1981, absolutely continuously. I'm passionate about this organisation and the work that I do. I planned to be a librarian when I was 16. I have never ever changed my mind. I've always believed in being an active member of this organisation, and the groups that I have been secretary and treasurer and chair of are without number. And I have founded groups, and I have co-founded groups like Chill and Healer, and if you're in the health sector, you'll know about that. I am an experienced trustee of charities. I've been trustee of 3 charities, the Hall Carpenter Archives, where I had to make staff redundant because our funding vanished, of Health Matters, again a trustee of that in Milton Keynes, and of Libraries North West, which we closed down because the Museums, Libraries and Archives Council told us that they would be taking over. And how I wish we hadn't closed that organisation down. I am currently chair of CILIP North West Branch, and that's part of what colleagues on council currently have been talking about, that review of branch and groups, and I'm leading the change that CILIP North West Branch is currently undertaking in terms of its merger with Career Development Group North West. I think we have transformed the branch in the northwest of England. It is a lively, dynamic, well thought of body. We get 40 to 50 people every time to our annual members' day, and some of you in this room have been there and seen what we've done. I'm a great one for doing things, and it says so in my manifesto. I don't believe you get things done by sitting in committees. I don't think sitting around table gets things done. It's what you do in between that matters. And those of us sitting at this table will all be doing that on top of the day job. You have to be passionate about that. What I said at the beginning of my manifesto is there is no profession without a professional body. And we really have to think about that. I work with doctors and nurses and allied health professionals, and Alice knows what I'm talking about and is nodding vigorously, thank God. All of those people have the respect of the public, and they are backed up by their professional body. We have to have a professional body that's equivalent to all those Royal Colleges. We have to have our place, if you like, to use a historical phrase, in the sun. And we have to do something about recruitment and retention. And we can talk all we like about what happens to the younger generation. And Tom's right, we have to find ways of engaging with them, absolutely. But this is an issue about leadership. This is what is happening in the Director of Libraries office in every one of our universities. This is what's happening in the office of every head of county and borough library services. It is those people who set the pattern of professionalism and engagement with the profession for their staff. And if the heads of library services in public libraries and in universities aren't with us, then their staff will not follow. And we have to do something about that, as well as bringing on the young people. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much to all of our 6 candidates. Having been in a position to watch very closely the work that Council does over the last 2 or 3 years, I can only show my admiration and respect to the 6 people who have just spoken. Being a councillor is not an easy option. It's a very hard role that you have to fill. It's a time-consuming role, and it's one that does take an awful lot out of anybody that does that. So irrespective of anything else, and before we move on for this evening, I would just like to say on behalf of the entire membership, thank you very much to all 6 of you for putting your money where your mouth is and actually choosing to stand. Now, we have got some time available. The short break is supposed to be at 6:45, and I would rather like to keep to that break rather than break earlier, which means that we can go into some of the questions now, and then, as I say, we'll still break at 6:45. I'm not going to be particularly strict on timekeeping because we do have a fair amount of time available, but I would ask each member, each candidate, to stick to about 3 minutes responding. So with a nice icebreaker to get you started, a question from Alice. If elected, what steps would you take to bring the Chartered Institute of Library and Information Professionals into full compliance with its Royal Charter and the bylaws and the general regulations which refine it, and in particular to ensure that all of the appendices to the general regulations are fully compliant with the Royal Charter, the bylaws and the general regulations? Thank you very much for that question, Alice. It's not one that I was unsurprised to see being asked, so thank you for that. Would anybody like to start with that? So what steps would they take to bring CILIP into full compliance with the Royal Charter? Anyone is welcome to start.
I'm happy to start.
Okay.
I mean, we are professional information, professional librarians, professional in everything that we do. We have to get those fundamentals and basics absolutely right. And I know that I would love to be able to quote chapter and verse in the way that Alice can, and I can't. I tell you that. Well, we were having a discussion earlier about which of the bit of Queen Victoria's reign is the right start date, and none of us are quite sure. But there's a fundamental principle here, isn't there? Absolutely. And I doubt that anybody's going to disagree with me, which is why I've started. In that we have to get that right. We should be able to find that material instantly and easily on the CILIP website. There should be a place for it. Yeah, I know that. That's why I said it. We have to get those things right. Those should be fundamentals, and we shouldn't be, quite frankly, we shouldn't be still having this conversation. And I don't know why we are. And if we don't know what we're doing, then why don't we get Alice to come and do it for us, quite frankly? and you know, that's my answer.
Thank you, David. Somebody else?
I mean, I would, having heard Alice at a number of meetings raise issues to do with the Charter and regulation bylaws, I suppose I'd go with David on that. I think it's the kind of thing that sometimes in the hecticity of CILIP life that you referred to, thank you, Phil, you can put that aside, saying we'll deal with that next week or we'll do that tomorrow and so on. We have just gone through, and we'll be out shortly if not already, the governance review, and that will impact on regulations and bylaws and so on. It does have to have the approval of the Privy Council, indeed the Queen in Council, so Her Majesty will actually sign off any alteration to the governance review. Obviously after the membership has voted on it. Let's get our priorities right, and people in order of importance. And that will all be happening next year. Hopefully. And maybe during that time we should get that sorted out. And I think maybe sometimes I'm not the best person for detail, but I'm happy to sit with Alice for an hour or two and just say, what are these issues that keep recurring? And let's bottom it once and for all. Because I think Alice, who comes to a lot of these things, puts a huge amount of commitment and time into CILIP activity. And I think we should give you a chance to talk about other things as well, because you must have so much experience and so many ideas. So let's move on this one.
Thank you, John. Somebody else to volunteer. Tom.
Yes, I mean, perhaps I could strike a slightly different note in that I do believe that the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. And I tend to think that we have a royal charter because we've always had a royal charter. I don't think CILIP actually needs a royal charter in the 21st century to function.
Needs a constitution.
We certainly need a constitution and we need bylaws, and they should be clear and they should be known, and they should be in sufficient detail to be fit for purpose. I would very much appreciate a discussion with Alice to find out precisely what the issues point out, because you have on occasion tried to explain them to me, and I have to confess that I don't think I fully grasp them. And I think in the light of that conversation, yes, we should look at them. But I don't think anything's sacrosanct here. The fact that something was written down in 1877 doesn't mean that it should apply in 2013.
CILIP can get rid of its royal charter by a two-stage process.
Can I comment on that? And I don't others want a chance, just to say that in the governance review we did an analysis of the benefits and disadvantages of being chartered at the behest of Dave Percival, who raised it in one of the consultation events about the governance review. And Jill there went away and did a decent piece of work, all came back, we looked at it, we discussed it, real range of pros and cons, and it was clearly advantageous to have a charter and to be chartered. So that remains in the governance review, and that documentation presumably will be available to everybody in the process. But it's an interesting question.
Had you finished, Tom? Or?
No, I have, yes.
Yeah, okay. Karen at the end, yeah.
I'm sure that we should have, if we need to have a working group to look at it, then obviously do. But I think the important thing is that we do have a royal charter. I think the fact that we're chartered professionals actually does give that gravitas in the workforce. It does put us on a parity with professionals, so I would say we should have a royal charter.
I actually read it for the first time in years on the way down. It was a terrible admission, but it's still an excellent document, I think. It sets out a lot very clearly. Research, dissemination of knowledge, maintenance of proper library services, etc. So I think it's a document that I should read more often, and probably we all should, to be honest. So yeah, and I agree with Karen. I think having a charter is very important. I think it gives us respect with fellow professionals. It gives us status, which is important, and that status we should build on it, frankly.
Thank you, David. Andy?
I'm in the lucky position of being the one this time round who can also say I agree with everything that everybody said. Yeah, if there are issues with compliance, we have to deal with them. But yeah, we need to be clear about what those are. And yes, otherwise, I would entirely agree. I think a charter is a very valuable thing to have as a professional body. It adds weight, and I would certainly not want to do away with it by any means. But yeah, the original question was about compliance and what would you do about compliance. Well, let's see where people think there are weaknesses in compliance and address them. But yeah, equally, along with just about everybody else, I think I'm not sufficiently au fait with the finest detail of every last bit, and I'm certainly not aware of any massive failings, because we'd have been taken to task about them if there had been such.
Any further comments from anyone? One of the very first discussions that I ever had when I was elected and became vice president was with Alice, and she introduced herself to me, and she said to me, "And have you read the Royal Charter?" And I was able to say, "Yes, Alice, I have." To which there was an element of surprise, and I then went to say, "Ask me why I've read the Royal Charter, Alice." And so she did, and I said, "It's mainly so that you won't be able to nag me about doing so." Which is probably not the best reason for reading the Royal Charter, but as David said, I'm glad that I read it, and it was a very interesting and very useful document as well. So thank you very much for that question. Right, the next question I would like to ask is one from David, and it's a fairly short one, but very pertinent to where we are. The roles available for library information and knowledge professionals are diverse. How do we attract and retain new members? So how do we attract and retain new members? Anybody? Yes, David, and then Andy.
Well, firstly, congratulations for the council and the student policy of making it free for students, because I think that's an excellent way of doing that. Certainly I know at our university the students have warmly received it. Things are very tough for them financially, so any help that the profession as a whole can give them I think is great. So that's certainly one good way of doing it. The issue over the various sectors that we have and that we represent, that's not a new thing. I mean, I'm getting an impression that kind of people are suggesting it's slightly new. We've had an information management course for over 20 years. When I was a student, our course was represented by both IIS and LA. My first job offer way back in the 90s was a law librarian, so I don't think any of this is new. I think we've been a very diverse profession for a long, long time, and it kind of disappoints me sometimes when I hear, talk of new areas that are essentially areas that have been established for quite some time. There may be new opportunities outside of that, and how we attract those people is a challenge. But going back to my original point, I suppose, about being a strong professional body that has a high profile, that's probably the best way of doing it. The best way of marketing yourself is to be visible to people.
Thank you very much. Andy?
Yeah, I too was of course going to say that I'm extremely pleased that we've got this new policy with regards to students, because it means that we can bring people in not only from traditional mainstream library programmes, but from related programmes who are probably the ones who are not opting in of their own volition, and it gives us a much better chance to, I wouldn't really want to use the word condition, but to expose them to the sort of, to the benefits of having a body like ours and what we can do. And the new specifications we've got for what we expect of a professional and the way that can tie into training, I think that's going to be tremendously helpful in bringing on information professionals in all areas, and also in demonstrating a real benefit to a student as they progress to becoming a more fully rounded professional. I think the other thing I would like to say would be that not so much directly about recruiting new people, but about the spread of the professions. I entirely agree. This is not something that's new. When I was out in industry before I went into UCL, 30, 40 years ago, people wanted hybrids. Mm-hmm. They did not want a librarian, an archivist, a records manager. They wanted somebody who could deal with all the different aspects of what I think of as the information professions. And I think it's a crying shame that not only are we struggling with these issues within CILIP, but that we aren't bringing in the other organisations, like the archivists and the records managers and so on, because I have always felt we deal with the same stuff, and we've got it completely back to front in focusing on the differences rather than the similarities in our professions. And I think that's the way to reach people, to focus on the similarities.
Okay, thank you. Tom and then Karen.
Yes, I agree. No, I mean, at one point we had very good relations with those organisations, and indeed other Society of Indexers, one can mention. But I think a strategy for recruiting people that depends on poaching them from other organisations is not the way forward. What we need to recognise is that there's an awful lot of people out there who have either been members and left us, or have taken a conscious decision not to join. And we need to think about how we get into their heads and how we persuade them. In my view, the thing that works best is contact with a CILIP member. And I think it's great that a meeting like this is open to non-CILIP members. It would have been fantastic if the CILIP members who had come had all brought along a non-member with them to show them what happens at something like this. And that's how I think we'll get people. Personal contact, talking to them, saying, this is what I get out of CILIP, so why don't you get the same benefits? You could be part of this too. And we do have a much more open attitude now than perhaps we once did. I mean, I can remember when I was a young professional, I went to professional bodies and I was a member, for heaven's sake, and people would look at you as if you were a dreadful intruder. We don't do that now, thank heavens. But let's have that attitude to other people and talk to them and bring them to meetings. And I think that's the way that they will grow.
Thank you, Tom. Karen?
I think we do. I mean, I hear what you're saying, that we've always had information management, and I've been an information management manager for many years, but I don't think that I've seen CILIP as being an organisation that's leaned forward to be inclusive. I'm a librarian as well, and I certainly first and foremost saw CILIP as a professional body for librarians. So it is really important that we advocate and promote that we're a body that is for all of these people, and we're not poaching them from other professional bodies. I have 1,100 kin professionals in government, only 500 of which are members of a professional body. So there are 600 there that we can attract to bring into the profession. And things we can do to help are, like we've negotiated with CILIP, we've got a discount for new government members, and that's, I'm going to use that to try and catch those 600 and to get them to join us as a professional body. But we do need to be inclusive. We do need to be talking about the skills that we all have across the piece that we have in common, because we do. It's the skills we have that make us information professionals. It's not where we work or the building that we work in. It's that we have in common.
Thank you. John?
Thanks, sir. Yeah, well, where to start? This is a hugely important question, and everything that people have said. I think I got a new member on Monday, right? That would be my nth in the last year. So I do the personal bit too, and I think Tom's absolutely right on that. But we need to get across to a wider market, and I think it goes back to the changing offer that CILIP has, because people won't join it to be nice or to help us. They will join it because we've got the services and products that they need. And so things like professional knowledge and skills base, the website, the virtual learning environment, all those things, dealing with issues that matter in their working lives, the whole stuff around literacy, the thing about community-run libraries, the information management summit this year, the information literacy work after the well, not because of, anticipating the OECD report. All of that stuff means that then people might find it worth joining. They're not going to join because they're not in something. They'll be happy to go and spend a couple of £100 somewhere else. So I think that's really important. And Karen mentioned the work with government librarians, giving us the numbers, very helpful there. It's hard work, that. I mean, I think that took yourselves and CILIP officers a good few months to work out a way of making up something that would really be attractive to people working in government in those great numbers that you mentioned. The student offer is fabulous because what it's doing, it's not being nice, it's not, it's a bit like Andy says, it's a bit, but it's what you do. You have to go out to people and say, look, we need you, but you also need us because we've got the things that will help you in your career in the years ahead. Come in now, it's free, and then, hopefully, I'm sure, people will stay with us because of the things that are going on. The partnership with other professions isn't necessarily about poaching, I'm sure we all agree on that. It is about sharing the profile raising challenge in professions that are everywhere in society. Every organisation has got some aspect of archives or librarian or information person or knowledge manager, but their profile, their status is not highly visible to the powers that be in their organisation. Where is the business leader who gets the piece of information that talks about the market, who says, oh, thank you, librarian? It comes from the PA via the such a department and so on. But out there is the librarian or the information officer who's brought that information together to make that company a success. So those are the kinds of things I think we need to handle and build up a package, an offer that makes people want to join CILIP and build up the membership for the future. And then each of them go out and get another one, as you say.
Thank you, John. And finally, David.
What they said.
Fair enough.
Well, there's nothing to disagree with there, is there? There are a number of messages here. Firstly, we have to remember that members of this organisation, potential members of this organisation, don't necessarily work in libraries. And I'm hoping that my CILIP North West Branch treasurer is on the other end of that camera, because I'm talking about Michelle Peel, who is treasurer of North West Branch. And every time in committee we talk about libraries, she pipes up and says, remember, I don't work in a library, I manage data protection. And that is a very salutary reminder to us all. We have to reach out, as everyone said. I think working in partnership is essential alongside all of us information professionals in the NHS. Are thousands and thousands of people working in informatics departments who are struggling with their professionalism, struggling with their status. They don't have a professional body. UK CHIP has been set up and has managed to attract 600 people in a very long period of time, but there's an opportunity there for thousands of people potentially to try and understand what we do and for us to make some kind of offer. And the third issue is the one that Tom's raised, because he's absolutely right. It's about that personal touch, and it's about laying on opportunities for both members and non-members, like in SILIP North West Branch, to come along and see what happens and see what's going on in library and knowledge services in the broadest sense around a particular region or a patch. And I've overheard people at branch events say, I'm not going to cancel now. Both with Annie coming to speak to us and with Phil coming to speak to us, and being absolutely taken with the speakers that we have in terms of what's going on in the knowledge and library field. But finally, I want to come back to the point I made earlier, that if we're going to retain, we can attract all we like. If we're going to retain, that has to be about professional leadership. That has to be about organisations where the leader values the profession and values SILIP and is a member, an active member of SILIP, and believes in the charter and believes in ACLIP and believes in fellowship and promotes those amongst his or her team. Because if the leader doesn't, then why would anybody else? And that's how you retain. So we've got to get to the people at the top as well, to the people who are coming into the profession new.
Thank you very much. We've run over by a couple of minutes, so we'll come back in about 10 minutes' time. So for those of you that are at home and watching this live, just time to go and get yourselves a cup of tea, and we'll see you in 10 minutes. Thank you very much. Right, welcome back. I can give you a bit of quick factual information. We do have over 100 people watching on the live stream, so very nice to see you. Right, the next question that we have it's quite a long one from Doug, and I'll read it out and then I'll press C at the end. SILIP is held in high regard on an international level and currently has over 300 members living outside of the United Kingdom, with this figure likely to increase markedly with a new student membership. Do you believe that SILIP should actively encourage international membership and improve the support it provides for the professional development of these members within its existing framework of qualifications? Or alternatively, should SILIP seek to collaborate more closely with other national bodies around the globe to support them in the development of their own professional frameworks? So generally the role of overseas members, should we be working more with them or encouraging them to work more locally within their own communities? Anybody would like to start with this one? David and then Andy.
Well, yes, I think the international links are excellent. One of the things you notice when you go to IFLA is how high profile SILIP is. Bob, God rest him, I haven't been to any since Annie took over, but certainly Bob was very good at being high profile and talking to a lot of bodies. I know before he passed on he was looking at doing stuff in Ukraine, if memory serves, with their professional bodies. I think the professional qualifications is one of the best things SILIP has, and so few other bodies have it. Marketing that abroad I think is a good thing. The agreement with New Zealand, Lianza, reciprocal agreement with them. I mean, reciprocity is good anyway. The fact we get quite a lot of American students coming to our course because it's accredited and it's recognised by the ALA. So, and they always enrich the course. So yes, I think the more international links that we can build, the better. And certainly, I think selling the professional qualifications abroad, trying to get other bodies to take them on board would be a good thing, definitely.
Thank you, David. Andy.
I think the short answer is yes and yes. To take the second point first, yeah, I think it's absolutely incumbent on us to be working in tandem with all other associations across the globe, because we need to think of ourselves globally in an increasingly global environment, and if we can lead in many areas, then I think that's a good thing too. And certainly from my own perspective, within a university, we get a lot of people who come to our postgraduate programs who've already done a qualification and come to us for accreditation. So clearly we've got something valuable there, and I think it's all the more valuable with the new scheme that we're looking at putting into place. With regard to sort of growing international membership more generally and support of international membership, well, I think we have to think of those. I think we want to grow it, but we have to think about what the ramifications of that are and how we then support a larger number of international members, because it changes the dynamic. However we look at it, if we're dealing with people who can't come to local events, it's bad enough with different parts of the country, and there are issues also with differentiation in subscription rates and so on. So I think we need more thought on that. But in principle, yes.
Okay, thank you. Another volunteer, John,
Yeah,
and then Tom.
This is another really good question. CILIP obviously is active in IFLA, and I can reassure David that in the last couple of years we've had some very good events at IFLA, and Annie and Phil and also Mark Taylor and Sam Edwards have been to the IFLAs, and next year IFLA's in Europe, relief for everybody buying airfares, but also there will be I believe a public libraries satellite conference here in the UK which CILIP is going to be organising with colleagues there, and that will be probably in here. So that will be important on several fronts in terms of people's interests. There's a legacy, isn't there, that the Library Association, which my pedigree is from that direction, has a sort of a historic status, and there's a little smack of colonialism here, because a lot of countries have a national body because the United Kingdom had a national body. And that is something to be able to look fantastically proud of. It's a bit like the railways in India. But I think it's time. I met a colleague in this room last year who was working in South Africa and was helping form a federation of African library associations. And she wanted to meet people in the UK and so on. And she was going to Ireland, and I've been working in Ireland, so I put in touch with her. And I think it is two-way. It is about, giving people the support they need, making sure that the professional knowledge and skills base, which is a product and which a number of countries are already showing an interest in licensing, and that's great for us because it's good for our status and it's good for income, but it's also good for a more equal relationship with those other countries and not a historic one. Putting that aside, is working then with people like that lady who are, if you like, building up the profession and the professional body in her own country and indeed in related countries around. So I think it is a mixed bag, but a very powerful one with some very powerful opportunities for CILIP to have a postmodern relationship with other countries and to work with other professional bodies on an equal basis.
Thank you, John. Tom.
Yes, I certainly lean towards the collaborative approach that was suggested in the second part of the question. If you think of health professionals, David and I both know how much the doctors and nurses we serve with work internationally, and health library and information workers have quite a proud record in that regard, and we've hosted the International Congress in this country, I think twice now, and who knows, there might be another one. Whether we as CILIP should actually be seeking to recruit internationally, I'm less sure. And I look at it from the position of what would we say to somebody who's working in our field in this country but happens to have a foreign passport. We'd say join CILIP, wouldn't we? We'd say there's something for you to be in the professional community where you're working. And I think I would say the same thing to a CILIP member who was going abroad to work if they were going for a long period. I mean, yes, it would be great if you, for sentimental reasons, you maintain that link with us, or if you're thinking of returning to work here again, then yes, by all means keep it up. But I don't think they're our core audience when we're trying to recruit people. Similarly, if they go abroad, our advice to them should be get stuck in with the professional association there. Take your skills to that, take your ability to work, because professions are international. It's about international skill, which we all practice in different places.
Could I come out of this internet, not to hold
Briefly,
the
yes,
microphone,
yeah.
but because it's an interesting conversation. There is such a thing as comparative librarianship, and I wouldn't want Doug to think we were letting the international group down, which has a fantastic news magazine and loads of events, mostly in London, but really, really good stuff, very animated and active people. But there is a thing about comparative librarianship, but it's not just about gathering members or helping associations, it is about learning. Literally just yesterday I was reading the quarterly, is it Scandinavian Library Journal, lots of really interesting stuff in there about different kinds of library work and development there. We know Scandinavia is very innovative and forward-looking, and they do new and wonderful things, even though they have pressures like everybody else. So I think it is about, it's more about, it's this equal thing, it's about working to learn from each other, not about copying members from here and there. And I think that sort of weighting towards it, without disabusing the international group of its achievements. I think that's the focus.
Okay, thank you, John. Karen?
I just support that we should be collaborating with other bodies overseas, and I think if we can promote the PKSB and we can get other countries picking that up, then that's a real way of us engaging and influencing other countries.
Thank you. And David?
I really can't say that again, can I? I really can't turn around.
You need to get in quicker, David.
Yeah, I do. I did
Fast one,
earlier on. That's all very interesting, and certainly Tom's made some very interesting points there. I think if you look at what's happening in universities, and I know the universities in North West England best, they're very busy extending their international student base, they're busy building campuses in all sorts of places across the world. I'm not suggesting that Ridgemount Street is suddenly reimagined in the Far East or anything like that. So I think there is a balance to be struck here in terms of trying to understand what else is happening in other sectors, trying to look at what's happening in other countries and getting the best in terms of a two-way discussion going. And I'm not sure I've given it a great deal more thought than that. But I think we need to keep a very clear eye on the issue around balance here. And I think the issue around encouraging local developments in other countries is absolutely the right one, where we can.
Or learning from where they're more...
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I told you I didn't have anything to add, really, there.
Okay, thank you very much. For those of you that have been posting your questions on Twitter, this is where you now get your opportunity to take centre stage. And my first question comes from Georgina. What are each candidate's thoughts on the current membership pricing tiers? And is this linked to low membership of CILIP?
I don't mind starting again.
Okay, David, go for it.
I actually don't have a problem with the pricing structure. It's going to make me unpopular. But I think a lot of what we've said tonight is about the offer to the members, and I think that's important. But I think being a professional should mean you should want to be part of the body first and foremost, and the professional body should deliver services they want. I don't think it's that expensive. It's certainly more expensive than the ALA. The ALA has 27,000 members, so I think there is a balance has to be struck. So I do empathise, and certainly when I was a student, or when I just qualified, thought it was too much money. But I think there's a balance has to be struck between how much it actually costs and whether you value it intrinsically as well. And I think we need to try and encourage people more to want to be part of it. And I think sometimes the pricing models, I was saying at the break there that I'm lucky to run the list profession mailing list, which is a task at times, and the number of times people are moaning about the financial aspect of it concerns me, because for me, as I say, it's an important issue, but it's not something that should dominate conversation. I think people should want to be members of a professional body. So sorry, that'll make me unpopular, but that's my view on it.
Thank you very much, David. Tom, next.
If you remember, we had I think, rather painful discussion about this at an AGM in, was it 2007? Thereabouts, where we had previously had quite a complex tiered structure of membership. And it was complex. It was complex to administer. And I mean, frankly, if I had a year where I'd been unemployed for a bit, I found it the devil's job to work out what I should be paying in that. And so we went to a simpler structure, and we thought, right, that solved all the problems. But it wasn't an easy decision to reach. I remember that AGM was quite a difficult one. And I'm certainly getting a strong feeling, and there was a lot of discussion around the time of the AGM in Birmingham about this, and people saying, well, you know, I'm a new professional, okay, I'm going to get the student discount rather than a student, that's great. But then when I'm a new professional, I'm paying the same as my boss who's on 2-3 times the salary. So I think maybe it is time to revisit the question, and possibly we should, at the next AGM, put to the membership a tiered structure, not perhaps as elaborate as the last one, but one where there is a bit more of a means-related element.
Thank you. John?
That's certainly been under review in the last year because it's part of the budgeting process to look at the membership fees. And again, certainly Council last year said that we shouldn't drastically alter the current fees until we've got all those new products and services in place, because whatever goes up or down, it's got to look like it's value for money. I agree with David. I mean, I've always been a member of CILIC, like people here have, and lots of people have. The Angels of CILIC, we've been here a long time. But that's because I did get a lot out of it. But I got a lot out of it because I joined things, and I went to things, and I took part in things. I might not have been on committees. I wasn't a committee type person then. But I was in, you know, I'm still in a lot of groups where it was related to what I was working in, and I found it really helpful to be able to engage with those issues and with the people doing similar things to me. So it's this sort of seesaw again. It's what you get in, what you put in, what you get out, and so on and so forth. We do have to look at it, and we will look at it again next year. Whichever combination of us is here, it will be an issue we'll have to deal with. David will be here, so you know that will be. It does dominate, unfortunately, because you know it's people's lives. And it was interesting when I said earlier about the people leaving CILIC. There were a number of people, a small percentage, who said they left because of financial constraints. It wasn't it wasn't an overwhelming number, but clearly in the present time, some people do find paying for things difficult. Maybe they've gone part-time, or they're job sharing, or they've been made redundant, or whatever. So there is an issue to deal with. But at the same time, it's an important part of the budgeting process, and we have to manage it very carefully, which is why you won't get a sort of clear answer now, yes, we'll do that, because it's something that has to be worked on very, very hard, very deliberately, and very conscientiously to get to the right answer. But it's time to look at it again, and that I'm sure will happen in the coming year, whoever's on council.
Thank you, John. Karen?
Yeah, I really support what David said. It's about when do we get the benefits and the value, and we're able to sell the what CILIC is about. People will accept the fees, but for me, there's something about the tiers not quite right. They need tweaking, I think, rather than an overhaul. So maybe there's something that we should be doing in the future to look at that. I'm in a rare environment where the government supports professional fees, so it's a bit easier for us in government. So, but maybe there's something that we should be looking at in convincing employers that if you want a chartered information professional, then you should. That's part of the package. I mean, that's something for another day.
Thank you. David?
Just an opportunity not to go last. I still think there are too many people in this room called David, which is getting very confusing. I doubt we can actually do anything about that. The days when anybody in the NHS got their fees paid, I'm afraid, are long gone, and it's really good to hear that government at civil servant level still does that, but the NHS won't. I think we've got some consensus across the front here that there is some tweaking to be done. And the fact that I'm paying the same as someone who is comparatively newly qualified doesn't feel quite right. So I think a review of that is appropriate, and it's just about recognising some of the things that people have said, which is the very difficult financial backdrop out there, and the number of people, particularly in public sector, who are finding themselves taking part-time work where they used to be full-time, or indeed taking pay cuts. I've got library staff in the NHS who are taking pay cuts in order to keep their jobs. So we just need to bear that in mind, and I'm sure we will.
And Andy?
Well, the original question was about tiers and the effect, and was that having an effect on membership numbers? And I think probably it's more levels of subscription in general, despite what's been said about exit interviews, because lies down, lies in statistics, and of course you don't hear from everybody. And I genuinely suspect that we have lost members across the board, not just new members who feel it's a lot to pay, but people who don't feel its value or haven't felt its value. And to be brutally honest, I've been through phases in the not too distant past where I've questioned the same thing myself. I'm thinking, what am I really getting for a couple of £100? Now that's turning round hugely, and where we're going is going to be well worth that, I think, to the majority of members. But it's about getting the delivery of the offer up to where we are. We kind of dropped behind, and we're now catching up again. In terms of the tiers themselves, I think it'll never be perfect. No matter how you divvy up the membership to try and make it fair, there will always be people who are the wrong side of a boundary who are going to find themselves disadvantaged. So it's without wanting to belittle the idea, it's a bit pot luck. We make our best judgments, and it will vary from year to year, and we will modify it. Every year the subscription model has to be set, it has to be agreed by the members. So we're always going to do our best to get a fair model, but it's never going to suit everybody. So I don't think we should agonise over it.
Okay, thank you. I wish I could answer this next question myself, but I can't. I would just remind the candidates that we do not have a bleep button for this next question, whether they need it or not. Question from Ruby. What do you think of Ed Vasey? I'll give Andy a chance there since he chuckled first.
What? Well, I was bleep, maybe. This may be unpopular, but I think to a large extent our sort of displeasure that's being focused at Ed Vasey is being focused in the wrong place. I was against the motion of no confidence, and I'm quite happy to say that. Because, yeah, all right, he's not been the greatest minister, but blaming him directly for all of the cuts, I think, is completely misplaced. The people who are putting these cuts into place are the people in individual councils, and they're the people we should be angry with, and they're the people that we should be addressing. Yeah, OK, you can make an argument which says he might be clamping down on them by using the Public Libraries Act and so on and so forth, but the demons in this scenario for me are the people in local councils who make those active decisions to close the libraries.
Thank you. David?
Absolutely. And that isn't the end of the answer. I am touring all the public libraries in North West England. I'm meeting all the chiefs. It isn't Ed Vasey who is causing them to reduce the number of professional staff in a total staffing of 60 to 3 professionals, or in a staffing of over 100 to 11 professionals. That's local councillors and local and the council and councillors. Ed Vasey is, forgive me, but he's a string of library ministers we've had. I was asked what in a survey just before now, who I thought was the best libraries minister we'd had. I couldn't remember one. I couldn't remember a name. They come and they go. They come and go very quickly. I happen to know this one because I looked him up for today, and he turns out to be the MP for Didcot, where I used to live. So I had some kind of connection there. But this is not about the libraries minister. This is about what happens in local councils, absolutely. And you only have to talk to a public library chief to hear that.
Thank you. Tom?
Except, and I've never met Ed Vasey, so I have no idea. I'm sure he's a charming and civilised gentleman. Except he does have the power to intervene under the Public Libraries and Museums Act, and that's a power he has refused to use in spite of situations arising which have been far worse than those that have arisen under any other minister. So I think to that extent he is culpable. That's not to let anybody else off the hook, but I think we should bear that in mind. And I think that's why the motion at the AGM won support. I was disappointed that people who disagreed with it didn't voice their disagreements in that debate.
David next, and then John.
I would agree with what's been said so far. I mean, I think he should be using his powers because he has them, and his job's to protect the public. But I equally agree the councillors are the ones that are the real villains in this, because for whatever reason, they don't value public libraries. And that's what this boils down to. They can use finances as the excuse, but some of the cuts have just been so draconian. I mean, it's unprecedented what's happening. So Vasey should absolutely be using his powers. But clearly the councillors think they can get away with it because he's not. And that's the big problem. But yeah, I would agree. In terms of villains, councillors are probably the biggest villains in this because they're the ones who are actually doing the cuts. But Vasey could protect the public's services by intervening. I mean, it took Burnham long enough over Cheshire, wasn't it, council? Wirral. It took him long enough. So, I don't think any of the library ministers are particularly noble. I mean, Hodge had her Amazon idea, didn't she? I mean, I just think they make stuff up as they go along, frankly, sometimes. But if he's got powers, he should be using them to protect the public, and he's not doing that. So, both villainous, but councillors more villainous.
Okay, thank you. John?
Right, well, I oppose the motion. I think all of council weren't keen on that motion because we just felt it wasn't going to help anything or productive. It wasn't focused where it needed to be. And the reason we didn't speak was because we decided to let the members speak, and we would take cognizance of that and of the vote and respond to it, and we'll be discussing that at the next council meeting in November. So it wasn't to dismiss it by any means or to play it down. Ed Vasey is a minister in a modest government department, spending a very small part of government budget. And that government is driven by a particular ideology, and I know there are people, maybe even listening or watching or tweeting, who recognise, ideology is a bit heavy, but who recognise the different political persuasions of different parties and know how that drives agendas. So what's happening to libraries is not peculiar to libraries in terms of local public services, or indeed, depending on your views, health and other parts of the public sector. In that survey that you will all see, because we've all written something for Public Library News, I presume that's what you mean. I remembered several ministers, because if you worked in public libraries, you do remember who they are. And the difference between Ed Vasey and my favourite minister. The first one was Chris Smith, who invented the term street corner universities, and coined it, I should say, and backed to the hilt the whole People's Network from idea to investment and to result. And that was the post-McColvin, nearest thing to McColvin we've had by way of a transforming change in public libraries. What Ed Vasey hasn't done, notwithstanding the intervention, is he hasn't been out to government to talk about strategy and the role of public libraries in today's society. And he knows, because he said it all when he was in opposition, he could talk about libraries till the cows come home when he was in opposition, and talk creatively and positively. And what's missing, and this has been Silip's stance, is from government a strategy for the future development of public libraries and setting them on course. And David and I were talking a little bit in the room before the meeting began downstairs about the way you promote libraries is by promoting what they're for, what they're going to achieve for society. And in the 19th century, it was literacy and preparing people for work and so on. And that sort of rings a bell. What libraries can do in society today, even the huge number that remain in spite of the terrible closures, if it's configured right, and if it's sold and presented to councillors right, then that could be the winning story. But it's a cross-government opportunity. It's about digital, it's about skills, it's about learning, it's about children, it's about older people. Libraries, in the way that we said librarians and information people and so on, manifest themselves in every part of society. Libraries have a role in every government agenda, and Ed's job is to project that role to other government departments, and that's what's missing at the moment.
Thank you. Karen?
I'm a senior civil servant, so no comment.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you very much. I have one more question. I don't have any others yet, so what I suggest that we do is I'll take the next question, and if we can then, if there are any others that come in, that's fine. Other than that, we'll wrap up before that. Richard is gesticulating at me, so we do have a couple more to come. This was actually a more generic question, so I'll change it around slightly if I may. It's from Shirley. Has the government responded to Silip's outrage about propaganda for volunteer libraries on the government website? I'm not aware if they have or not, so unfortunately, Shirley, I can't give you an answer there. But what I will, if I can, just very briefly, to play a little bit of devil's advocate here, what's better, a volunteer library or a closed library? David looks really miserable at that point, so you've just volunteered to...
I have, haven't
You
I?
have, and then Tom, yes.
Me, this
Yeah.
David.
That's
and not
right.
another David that you
Yes.
might have been meaning.
No, I was looking directly at you.
When
David.
you're voting,
Yes.
folks, that you get the right
David,
when you're
yeah.
ticking the box.
This is an issue. I can talk about NHS libraries because I know about those. We've got 40 NHS libraries in North West England. There are 165 staff, and yes, there are volunteers. Increasingly, and volunteering is a very strong and important tradition in the National Health Service. Bits of the NHS work because of volunteers, and library services aren't different or exempt from that, and I think volunteers have a role to play. But I am equally passionate that a library without a professionally qualified librarian is no such thing.
Thank you.
I have to say that if I'm faced with a bit of the NHS that wants to run its library service to support what doctors and nurses are doing to me when I'm ill, and they want to base that on volunteers, then let's shut the library down and face the consequences of that.
Thank you. Andy?
I think it's a very well made point, but it does depend on exactly what kind of library you're talking about. I've got a sort of fairly personal interest in this, given that I've been oddly quite heavily involved with the Free and Barnet People's Library, given that I play in their house band for their open mic nights, which is part of their way to raise some funds. And yeah, whatever the situation, I think you made another good point, which is that they are struggling for professional support. They've got lots of willing volunteers who will do things, but they need that professional input. And they're finding it very hard to work without it, and they're desperately trying to get that as volunteer effort. In terms of answering the question, yes, okay. I mean, in terms of something for a community, I think something is better than nothing in every situation. But the question's kind of off the point. I think the issue is the one that you were alluding to, which is that we need to ensure that we don't get to the point where that's the only option.
Thank you. Anybody else want to have a stab? Tom?
Yes, I mean, what everybody else has said, but there's another angle to this, isn't there? And it's one we don't mention very often when we talk about volunteers, and that is that newly qualified professionals are being told, if they haven't found work and they're going to the job centre, they're being told, go and volunteer. And an employer is then getting a professional librarian. They're not paying them a penny. And I think that's scandalous, and I think that's something that we should make a stand about. It's the same question with interns, though the intern culture is perhaps less widespread in public libraries than it is in other bits of the profession. What we should be saying, actually, about young unemployed qualified professionals is we should be taking them into workplaces, we should be putting them to work, and we should be saying to the employer, here they are, you pay them.
Thank you. David and then John.
Okay. I don't think it's an either-or answer. I mean, I think my concern, because my main interest really research-wise is information ethics. I've got huge concerns over volunteer libraries. I've got huge admiration for the people who do it. I think they're heroes and heroines, frankly, for doing it. But one of the things about a statutorily funded library service is there should be consistency in terms of governance, etc., etc. I mean, things like censorship can raise their heads in volunteer libraries, depending on who's running it. I just think it's not. I'm sure there are some very good volunteer libraries that will emerge or have emerged. But the problem is communities have a gun against their heads, so they don't have a choice, and that is the issue. So for me, I wouldn't say volunteer libraries will all be bad. I think the process is terribly bad, though, and I think long term it's completely going to destroy public libraries in the UK if we don't really fix it. And that's my gut feeling.
Thank you. John?
Back to ideology. We talk often about meeting the requirements of the Act. The Act also requires not just comprehensive and efficient libraries and collections and so on, but it requires, and I forget the exact word, but appropriate persons to run those libraries. So that also is in law and needs to be attended to. And I want to take an opportunity here to make sure that we start using the right language. Volunteer libraries, all right. Community-run libraries is all right. Community libraries is the name that some of us, quite a while ago now, but fought for to change from branch libraries. So that the term that described a local library was a term that showed how that library grew out of its local community. And in the 80s and 90s, a lot of us struggled with directors and so on to change the language that we were using to make sure that community libraries were properly run libraries with trained staff and professional leaders providing the right mix of services in the right setting. The other thing I'd be interested, and David might know, because I'm going to do a bit on this as well, is why some authorities are doing this and some aren't. And Lancashire seems to be enjoying a sort of a halcyon time of investment in libraries and so on. And I think it's because, knowing Lancashire a little bit, I think it's because they have made the case for libraries by showing what libraries do for the people of Lancashire. What's happening elsewhere is lazy. It's lazy local government. It's, everybody cut the budget by this year, everybody cut the budget by that year. There's no strategies, no thinking, and it's not good. And certainly I'm talking with where I live with people, but about getting a more creative approach to what libraries should be doing, so that the funding that councils do have can be directed at good library services that respond to local needs of all kinds. It is, however, a reality at the moment that this is happening, and I think next year SILIP colleagues are going to have to refresh their thinking on this. We've had a revised statement on volunteering, policy on volunteering, year before last, or last year rather, and it's time to revisit this, not to change that necessarily, but to re-energise our response to this changing situation.
Thank you, John. Karen?
I just wonder if it's a thing that volunteer libraries will become closed libraries, because if we're not got the services start to suffer and they're not sustainable,
Or taken over by the private sector, possibly.
Yes, so.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask for some more tweeted questions, please? I'm afraid you do have to walk in front of the camera. Thank you very much indeed. Right, we've got a fair number of them, so if I can ask you to keep your answers fairly brief on this one. Just to give you a bit of a heads up, Karen hasn't actually had a chance to go first at any of these. I think she's been far too polite, so I'll give you, Karen, a chance to take a stab at this first if you'd like to. This is from Ian. What steps will you take to lessen the power of council and increase the power of membership?
I'm sorry, really I'm thinking this one too.
That's all right.
So, what steps would I take? Well, I will say that I think it's really important that we have a council that has authority and power, and that it's the membership that's giving us that. I see lots of engagement with the membership, so it seems to imply that there's a criticism there. I mean, I do think that maybe there is something about the way that we elect our councillors, and that I'm not sure that having a ballot of the whole membership is the right way. And let me explain what I mean by that, in that I think we should be almost like applying for it as a job, and saying the skills that we have, and then sort of like being sifted, and then the membership then select us from from that criteria. Because I must confess, I think it's difficult to elect a councillor based on a manifesto and recording that list. I'm not sure I quite answered your question. I have gone off piece.
Okay, thank you very much. Andy, next, yes?
Put the clock on.
Okay,
Because I could run on this one. Because I feel very, very strongly, if only you could have been flies on the wall in some of the council discussions we've had talking about the governance review, for instance. I feel very strongly that we should stay very much in the hands of the membership for selecting councillors. Now, there are plenty of very good arguments for saying we should select to make sure that we get the skills. But a comment was made earlier on about sort of greybeards. I think it's critical we get younger people in, and they're not going to have the same kind of skills and experience, but that doesn't mean they can't contribute. It doesn't mean that they can't learn the skills, and being in the environment is the best way to do that. And I have, and I will continue to fight passionately to try and keep council membership open to anybody who wants to try and do it. Now, that means you've got to make some commitments and you have to learn skills, but the critical thing about council as a governing body, as I see it, is corporately we have to have the skills. It's not that every single individual has to have every skill. And if we are short of skills, we have means to address that by co-option or by bringing other people in. I am totally, and have always been totally, against any kind of screening or pre-application, because I think it's anti-democratic.
Thank you. And Tom had his hand next.
One very simple thing. We would make the general meeting truly sovereign, so that the general meeting's decisions are no longer advisory, but are mandatory on council. The other change, I think, would be a culture change, in that I would hope that council would have the courtesy that if it had views on a subject, it would be prepared to present them to the membership and not keep them to themselves.
That's it? Yeah. Okay, thank you. David?
I agree wholeheartedly with what Andy said. I certainly think a major aspect of keeping the council open to others. My fear in terms of how it's been advertised is that it was almost a job description for a management cast, which I think is extremely destructive, because as much as I respect management cast, I think it's a safe way of doing things. I think sometimes you need people in councils with ideas that go beyond just bean counting. I think sometimes you need that passion that might be lost in some of those people, not all of them, but some of them. And I think the more people we get who really, really are going to be the people who are expected to put up with these changes in their future career, because we're making decisions now about people who are just entering the profession. I mean, what arrogance. I mean, we need to consult more. I would use electronic voting more. So, I didn't really want to talk about the name change, but I actually don't have any problem in principle with a name change. I have a problem with not seeking permission before we make that decision. I would like to see more decisions. We want to do X, please vote on it. Okay, then we'll go ahead and do it. So that's the way I would like to see it, and we can do that very cheaply using electronic means to do it. We have email addresses for everyone, or we should do electronic voting and do it in the cheapest possible way. So that's the way I would increase democracy, is to use electronic voting more and ask for every big decision, ask before you actually propose to do it, basically.
Thank you.
Yeah.
John? Yeah.
Well, the electronic voting thing, you're absolutely right, and I think for this election itself, it will be the biggest proportion of votes will happen through electronic voting. So that's because we have now set up, as part of the programme, set up a sort of an electronic presence, if you like, where we can use that sort of thing for engagement. One of the things that concerns me is the numbers of people who engage, and it's still only a very small percentage of people who take part. And I don't just mean in the democratic processes for council. Maybe Ian, whichever Ian it is, I wonder, could join. I don't know, and stand. But I don't want to be facetious. I mean, it is open to everybody to do this. But no, the governance review proposals I mentioned earlier briefly includes a policy committee, and that policy committee, which was discussed at length, was about giving new professionals an opportunity from special interest groups to get involved in policy making. not in just running an evening meeting for for an interested topic or whatever, but local things and so on and profession specific, but to get involved in the running of the organisation, and by being on that policy committee with others, and let's not knock the experience, guys, because everybody's got it here of one kind or another. But to get involved with other more experienced people, so that not only are they involved in policy making, but it's a stepping stone to a greater involvement and a more strategic, not higher, but a more strategic involvement in the organisation as a whole. So there are steps in train, and I think that's fine. I just want more people to get involved and engaged and take part, and it'd be interesting to see how many people have taken part tonight. You mentioned the numbers earlier, Phil, at the very beginning. How many people take part? What's the value of this and the electronic environment now, of course, is that this is recorded and can be watched again on the occasion before the voting finishes on the 25th.
Thank you. David?
Council is what we make it. And I could just stop there. This is a membership organisation, and council is what membership makes it. I think the move to make this meeting and the processes more accessible to a membership which is spread across the UK through electronic media is absolutely the way forward. And I know you could talk about that, Phil, for several more hours, but you don't have the opportunity now. But that has to be the way forward. We are never ever going to fill the Charter Suite here in central London on a Thursday night with dozens and dozens of people anymore. But it's great to know that everybody's on the other side of that lens.
Thank you. We have 15 minutes left. We have a number of other questions, and I would like to get through as many of them as I possibly can do. So if you can keep your answers really just to a sentence for the next couple and see if we can get through them. This next one is from Steph. If elected, how would you use the role to save libraries? If elected, how would you use the role to save libraries? David?
For me, as I said in my manifesto, it's about meaningful advocacy. So I want to see more passion in what we do. I think we've been too polite for too long, and I think things have got too serious too quickly for us to be the polite little middle-class Southern English body that we've been for a long time. I think we need to get more grit about us and fight on behalf of the public for the services that we are responsible for.
Okay. Andy, I saw his hand.
It's not a short-term answer, but the long-term answer is to grow our profile and influence and put us back in a position where what we do is valued by employers.
Thank you. Karen?
I was going to say that it's about showing the impact that we have and about the value that we can have from what we're doing, and we've really got to get out and make sure that we're very, very clear about what libraries are doing and what we as professionals are doing.
Thank you. David, Tom, and then John.
Okay, impact is absolutely everything. We have to demonstrate impact, and I'm sorry for repeating myself, and I'm not sure how popular I'm making myself here with all the chiefs that I suspect are watching on the other side of that lens, but this is still about leadership. This has to be about heads of library services standing up and being counted for the profession.
Thank you. Tom?
Work more with trade unions and campaigning groups. We do it, we could do it better.
And John?
I'd go with Andy and Karen's comments about the profile, and also I'd add research, and I think we'll be doing some of that, so that we can demonstrate the value and impact of libraries and get out of the closet the research that's been locked away by the present government, because lots of stuff is there, and use that to make the case constructively and imaginatively.
Thank you. Next question from Mabina. What can Council / CILIP do to ensure that diversity is represented in the membership? What can Council / CILIP do to ensure that diversity is represented in the membership? John?
Yeah, I touched on in my presentation at the beginning the fact that we've just done a summit. I think Mabina was there. If it's the same person, I don't know. To look at the whole issue of equalities, diversity, social cohesion, social justice in CILIP, not as an organisation, but primarily in the sector that we work. We know we're not blessed with a diverse workforce from which we recruit our membership. And CILIP's tasks ahead, agreed at that workshop, include a study of the present workforce. We don't know what the diversity of the workforce is. At the moment, we have no current information. We'll do that next year and use that as the platform from which to build real strategies to attract people. But again, it's a bit like some of the other questions. We have to do it with employers, we have to do it with chief librarians. And you know, as somebody who's been a chief librarian in a very diverse city, Birmingham, you know, there are things you can do. And I was at a library camp. I'm sorry, short question there.
Yes,
library camp, two people were there who were black. I know diversity is about a lot of other things black, but two people were there black. They both come into the profession through positive action schemes. One, the Celebrity Compass scheme, and another, a scheme we ran in Birmingham. And the other two people, the 175 people at that meeting were black. I got there by doing positive things. Sorry.
Thank you. Next, Tom, yes?
In a sentence, we should try to find an answer to the question as to why 5 of us are chaps.
Yes.
And one's a woman in this election.
Thank you very much.
And to add to that, I suspect the chaps, and I'm conscious of my colleague to my right, your left, who is, but by and large we are white, middle class, educated, and mostly English.
I'm not two of those.
Okay, I thought that might be the case.
Yeah.
And when I look, if I look at my library network, my 165 people in the NHS in libraries in North West England, it is mostly women. It is almost entirely white. It is mostly able-bodied, mostly, and that does not reflect the diversity of the population in North West England. And as a profession, that's something that we need to challenge and to think about and to act upon.
Thank you. Karen?
It's something that we do need to act on, but it's not just us as a professional body, it's also looking at the attraction for our courses and the people that, because that's our feeder into the profession, isn't it? The people who are going to do our qualifications. So it's a big thing, but we need to look for role models that we can actually, people that will stand up and promote the profession and the diversity, because we do have diversity, but we just need to be very upfront about what we are doing.
On last, I think basically it's a white middle class profession, and that's a problem. And I would like to see CILIP do research into why people don't want to enter it from other backgrounds. I think it's. I loved libraries when I was a kid. I was a working class kid. I didn't think I'd be a librarian. I kind of fell into it, but I'm glad I did. But it's not something I aspired to be when I was a kid, and I think that's maybe a problem.
Okay, thank you very much. We've talked a lot about public libraries this evening, but it's also incumbent on us to remember that there are a lot of CILIP members who do not work in the public library sector. So this next question from David really does address that. What are the priorities for our members who don't work in public libraries? What should we be doing about those? David, yes.
I think the priorities are the same for every professional. I think you should keep up to date. I think you should represent your profession as well as you can. I hate this dividing line that we seem to create between public librarians and every other professional. Every member of CILIP should fight for public libraries. So yes, we're talking about a lot tonight, but we're talking about a lot tonight because they're under sustained attack. This kind of split that we have, I think, is unhealthy. I think it's not repairing, and I think we need to start to, really. It's almost like we don't want to talk about public libraries in case it offends someone from a KM background. Well, some of the most passionate advocates for the public libraries campaign groups have been KM people. So let's start to recognise that, and if talk about what joins us together, which is good skill set, advocating a broad profession, which is what we all do, and stop this kind of these camps that we seem to be creating, because it really annoys me, frankly.
Thank you, David.
No.
David, and then Karen.
Are you
David.
sure?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Northwest Branch is absolutely about bringing the various sectors, public, university, colleges, schools, and NHS, and all the others together to share the things we do really well, and to share the issues that we have, and to hear about the great successes we have. And we need to do much more of that. And when I talk to public librarians and when I talk to university librarians, we have masses of stuff in common. And there are real opportunities there.
Thank you.
Short answer.
Karen.
I'm just saying that our priorities are professional development. We've got the PKSB. That's a priority for all of us. It doesn't matter where you work. That's what we must do. We must keep our skills up to date. We must keep up with the changing information landscape, and we are one body. And that's important.
Thank you very much. Andy.
Yeah, I mean, all that's been said already. Plus, I think we really need to push to make people who don't work in libraries feel more welcome. That might sound a little controversial, but there's still a big perception amongst those who don't join that it's for libraries and not for them, and that's what we've got to address if we're going to bring them in.
Thank you. And John, and then Tom.
I think a couple of things that are in train, really. How you know, we all say what the problem is. I think we need to find some of the solutions, and one of them is the regional networks that are being developed. And Davis talks about the North West region specifically, obviously ahead of the game. But getting the regional networks to work across the sectors would be and will be increasingly a really important tool, and that's coming out of the review of branches and groups that we've done. So hopefully that will be one effective change.
Thank you. And Tom.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's in the very nature of the profession that our fundamental priorities are the same wherever our whatever accidents of employment history lead our members. So, I don't think the priorities for the public library sector are any different from the priorities for the health library sector or anywhere else. I've worked in many of them, and it's the professional unity that's the key thing.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, we have had a lot of questions. There are still some that we haven't had a chance to do, so I apologise to Liz for her question. She was asking about library closers and volunteers, but I do think we covered that in some respect. Ian also asked several other questions. I've taken one of yours, Ian. I'm sorry I didn't get round to the others. But you and anybody else who would like to continue the debate, and I'm sure we all would, can ask questions. They can be submitted to the CILIP LinkedIn group and ask your questions there, and I'm sure the candidates will be very happy to answer them for you. So we really are coming to the end of the evening now. So it's just a chance for me to say thanks, really. I'd like to particularly thank the audience who have turned up. I would like to thank the CILIP staff who have worked both before the event and during the event itself. Thank you very much. I would like to thank the team that have been taking care of the live event itself, so thank you to those. All of you who have watched live, all of you who have tweeted, thanks to all of you. And on behalf of everybody, whether you are a member or not a member, I would like to be able to channel your thanks to all of the 6 candidates. As I said earlier this evening, it's a very difficult job. It's a very rewarding job to do. And these people care enough about our organisation, they care enough about our profession to give of their own time to do that. And so whatever the outcome of the event, and please do vote because it's your organisation, whatever the outcome of the event, I would simply like to end by saying to all of the 6 candidates, thank you very, very much indeed for what you are doing. It is very much appreciated by everybody. Thank you very much, and good evening to you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil.